ako
natuto sa prinsipyong
inyo at serbisyong totoo.
mahalin tulad ni Kristo,
Isang puwarang Katoliko. Pagkakaisa
sa tulong at gawa,
masasalamat
sa lahat ng alaala,
pagbabago
ang misyon sa mundo,
magagawa sa biyaya ni Kristo.
ang kabataan
May hamon at alay,
sa ating bayan,
maging lingkod at tulad
ng pagbabago.
sa misyon sa mundo. Birhen Maria ang gabay at ang modelo. Sa mundong may bagong anyo, isang bansang may bagong sigla. Dahil sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong komunyo at serbisyong totoo. Kahalin
A blessed morning and welcome to all our CAP participants on this third day of the CAP Child Protection Summit with the theme, See It, Hear It, Report It, Protecting the Filipino Child. I'm Maria Violeta Chave, a member of the CAP Child Protection Ad Hoc Committee and the head of the Student Development Center of St. Scholastica's Academy of Marikina. I am honored to be your moderator this morning. Yesterday, we listened to Doc Nelly Limbadan and Mrs. Cherry Ragunton emphasize on the importance of home and school partnership in child protection in the session entitled, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. Today, we will zoom in our focus on the different ways on how to keep our children safe while online in this morning's session entitled, Protecting the Child in the Global Village. But before we continue, let us begin our webinar with an opening prayer as we remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we glorify and praise you. Because of your unconditional love and infinite mercy, we continue to enjoy the gifts of life and mission. The mission of guiding and protecting the children whom you entrusted to us. Truly, they are treasures from you. Bless their minds with sound decision-making skills. Bless their hands to be channels of affection and care. Bless their tongues so they will speak words that give life, encouragement, and graces. Protect them, O Lord. Be their shield and fortress. Let no bad influence corrupt their minds and keep them away from harm and illnesses. Let the Holy Spirit, a source of their guidance, courage, and hope. As educators and parents, make us good examples for them so we become instruments by which they will see you. We ask this in the holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good morning once again. For those who just tuned in with us, we welcome you to the third day of our CAP Child Protection Summit. We are live both on the CAP Facebook page and the CAP channel on YouTube. Before we begin, allow me to give you some reminders. First, as the talk is ongoing, we encourage you to post your questions or comments at the comment section of Facebook and YouTube. We will ask these questions or read the comments during the Q&A portion. Second, certificates. We receive a lot of queries about certificates. Please be informed that you will receive the certificates of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link has already been posted as part of the caption of this video both on YouTube and Facebook. But please note that the link will only go live from 11:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. today. So if you click it now, it's not going to open. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within 3 to 5 days. Finally, please be reminded as well that this is a free webinar brought to you in partnership with the Private Education Assistance Committee or PAYAC and Tech Factors. Again, we are giving this to you for free. But if you want to pay it forward, you may donate to our Kapatirang Kamagong Fund. It is our fund for helping the poor and struggling CAP mission schools because we heal as one. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks using hashtag CEAP Cares, hashtag I Love CEAP, and hashtag I Love Catholic Ed. Let me now introduce our session. In the technical note from UNICEF entitled COVID and its implications for protecting children online, it says, and I quote, "The pandemic has abruptly pushed our children's daily lives online. Children and their families have turned to digital solutions more than ever to support children's learning, socialization, and play. While these digital solutions provide huge opportunities for sustaining and promoting children's rights, these same tools have also increased children's exposure to online risks. Hence, this morning's session seeks to tackle the importance of cybersecurity and data privacy protection, among others, discuss concrete ways of ensuring a safe online environment for children, present general guidelines and procedures of handling cases of exploitations, as well as give reminders on how to protect the child in every step of the process. To help us achieve these objectives for this morning's session, entitled Protecting the Child in the Global Village, we have two resource persons. The first speaker is a Jesuit priest and anthropologist. Aside from being a full-time faculty of the Anthropology Department of Ateneo de Davao University, he also serves as the assistant to the Academic Vice President for Online Education. Previously, he worked in several institutions as vicar foreign, parish priest, school director and principal, university lecturer, and high school teacher. Let us all welcome with a virtual applause Father Ulysses F. Cabayao, S.J.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Father Oji, and I'm here to talk about the topic on protecting the child in the global village. I'd like to entitle my talk today as Securing Safe Spaces Online. We all are living in the midst of a pandemic, and I guess part of the challenge is how do we ensure that the spaces in which our children are studying or working or basically exploring the world are also spaces that would be safe for them as well. It's a bit of a challenge because we have been transported to another plane. Before in our schools, at least we could sort of manage how students explore the world. But now that they're in the midst of even this in the internet, I guess it becomes even more difficult. What's even more difficult now is because unlike before, where at least when they come into our campuses, we could attend to many of the things that could ensure that our children are protected by looking at our internet infrastructure, by looking at even the physical structure that we have. But at this point, much of that has practically disappeared. No? And our students, the children that have been entrusted to us, are accessing the resources that we have to offer from their very homes. No? And of course, there's always the question of whether the places where our children are studying are also spaces that could facilitate a safe space for them as well. But anyway, some of the things here that I will be sharing would be things that might seem familiar to everyone. But I just like to frame it by referring first to some of the research that has been done in terms of how children, specifically Filipino children, we're going to take a look at patterns of internet use, at least based on the data prior to the pandemic. So I guess we have to take that with a certain critical eye as well, because at least with this pandemic, much of this data would have to be updated as well. And then we will take a look at some of the risks that our children would encounter online. And then we'll take a look at guidelines or perhaps policies that we could reflect on, especially as we try to secure these safe spaces in the online world. So let me begin first by referring you to a document which is readily accessible. And I came across this document because of one of the co-authors in this article, Sonia Livingstone. So Sonia Livingstone is a professor based at the London School of Economics, but she's one of the foremost experts in terms of child internet use. And in my own research on online spaces, I guess previously I was doing research on Facebook. The name of Sonia Livingstone always comes up as one of my at least key references. But anyway, this document, which you could also access if in case you want to learn more about child online protection, is entitled "Investigating Risk and Opportunities for Children in the Digital World." But let me just sum up siguro some of the key takeaways that I found from going over this document. The first thing that I'd like to, I think that's worth sharing is that, of course, the internet has really opened a lot of possibilities for children. And it has really enhanced how they learn and how they explore the world. However, and this is, I guess, what the research tries to point out for us, but that it's not so much the amount of time that children spend on the internet that is something that we should be worrying about, but the how they engage in more broader and wider online activities, how they engage in these activities increase the likelihood of children encountering risks online. Later, we will expand on some of these risks, but what it basically tries to show us is that, when they're searching especially when they're searching for information online, there's always a great possibility of being exposed to inappropriate content or potentially harmful content. Maybe for many of us who may have children, maybe this is something that we might have overlooked, no? But there are so many apps, there are so many sites that could really, expose our children to these kinds of risks. No? Later, I will mention some of those apps when I go into the detail of this presentation. The second key takeaway that I found from this research is that those who have been vulnerable even offline are also the ones who are most likely to be vulnerable online. So many of the disadvantages that students have, even when they were offline, also tends to increase their exposure to online risk and harm. Take, for example, if you belong to a rather dysfunctional family, this could lead children to explore meeting up with strangers or with other people online. They may look to the online world as an escape, or maybe as an opportunity to be able to, basically explore other things apart from the conditions that they're in. So that's the second thing that we have to consider. And I think this is especially important for us in the Philippines. Not everyone would have ideal conditions in terms of how they're learning or how they're studying. And so, in my own experience, for example, there are students who would have to go someplace else in order to be able to access the internet. No? So they're practically leaving the safety of their homes to go to internet cafes, or perhaps to just go to some area there where there's a PisoNet where students could access and perhaps submit their assignments online. No? Of course, there's also what the problem of what we're seeing right now. We're in COVID really makes it even more difficult to even go outside. No, so that's why parang many of these students, despite the fact that there's some kind of ruling in some LGUs where children below a certain age, or youth below a certain age could not just go about as freely as they used to. Still, we have experiences of these children congregating in certain areas just to be able to do some online gaming, work, access their social media, and so on and so forth. All right. And then the third thing, which I think is very important, and which is something perhaps that I will be reiterating later, is that in the research, they found out that what seems to be a very strong factor in protecting or perhaps ensuring that children are safe online is having a positive relationship at home. So one of the key concepts that we will just look at later is the concept of parental mediation. And this is something that always comes up in many of the researches regarding child online protection. So what they've basically found out was that protecting children online is really becomes really more efficient when all the other things that you ensure, the physical infrastructure, the network infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, when these things, when these strategies are combined with supportive and encouraging parenting, then it really helps children become more, it empowers children and then basically helps children become more confident and secure when they're, and also, they're able to make decisions on their own when they're exploring online. So these are some of the key takeaways to sort of just give us an idea in terms of what or where our children are and what risks they are potentially exposed to when they go online. Let me just go into some, details. There is a study conducted by the same group of researchers by Sonia Livingston and her companions. And they were doing a comparative study of children's internet use. I'm just highlighting here some of the set data from that study, just so that we'll get a sense of the context in which our children are in right now. And let me just note that at least this study was done in 2019, prior to the pandemic. So we can imagine that perhaps, well, we could hypothesize that with the shift to online learning, with the shift to doing things online, perhaps these figures might have also increased as well. But anyway, in terms of the activities, we mentioned a while ago that children are, basically do a lot of their activities online nowadays. In terms of children who play online games, so online gaming is one of these activities. When you look at gender, at least 58% here is the boys, and the 28% are the women, the men and the boys and the girls. So you have more boys playing online games, and 28% would be girls who also play online games. As you can see, the rest of the percentage here, basically they're not playing online games at all. The next activity is, at least this is the use of social media or maybe video conferencing and the like. And in this particular statistic, we have at least 18% of boys and 15% are girls do 3 or more social activities online at least weekly. Okay. Here's another interesting data. Children who do at least one creative activity at least weekly, you have 20% of boys doing that, 17% of girls doing that. It's quite interesting to note how the figures change in terms of the activities that boys do. So much of these boys, as we noted earlier, more than 50%, 58% at least, are doing online gaming, but when it comes to creative activity, they're just doing 20%. And again, quite telling that in terms of information-seeking activities, and perhaps this is something that's pertinent to us as educators, children who do 3 or more information-seeking activities, at least weekly, only 18% for boys and 14% for girls. So, alam na anong what children use the internet for. But maybe this would change since they're sort of forced to really gather information online because now that they're studying online. Now, I think this is, again, something that's pertinent to our topic today. Children who have experienced harm online by gender. And these are figures from the Philippines. 19% of boys have experienced that, and 18% of girls also experienced that. So it's a fairly close percentage in terms of those who have experienced online. So one can't say that it's only the girls or only the boys who are affected by it, but at least we see that regardless of whether one is a boy or a girl, there's always that, there's this set of children who experience online. And it seems gender doesn't seem to be a big issue here. And here, as I said, this is pre-COVID figures. Children who use the internet at home, at least weekly, 45% for boys, 53% for girls. So it seems girls used to be the ones accessing the internet online. In terms of what the study shows, much of that is really for social activities, at least in terms of girls' usage. And in terms of boys' usage, this 45%, much of that is really for online gaming. But one could perhaps imagine that really, I guess, if one looks at the trend right now, this might, really go beyond the figures that you are seeing here on your screen. All right. perhaps to try to understand the risks that students or children encounter in the internet. This is another research. Again, if you note, Sonia Livingston is there. And I looked this up because Sonia Livingston and her companions offered a framework in order for us to be able to understand and classify the kinds of risks that children encounter on the internet. So basically, there are three kinds of risks that children encounter. The first one is in terms of content risk. No? What that means is this is where the risk that the child encounters as a receiver of mass-produced content. No? So this is basically when you're talking about internet marketing or websites or practically websites that they access or applications that they use. This is basically what the risk that children could encounter because they're the ones consuming this mass-produced content. The second one is in terms of contact, and here the contact risk basically means where we see the child as a participant in adult-initiated activity. Later, we will talk of examples about this, but what we're seeing here is this is where the child, whether interacts with adults, no? And sometimes in this case, much of the contact that happens is actually deceptive because some of the adults pose as younger or perhaps pose as peers in order to initiate contact with children. The third type of risk is the conduct risk, no? Where the actor or where the child is also an actor, either as a perpetrator or as a victim. No? So you have here instances of online bullying. And I guess anyone who has been managing their IT systems now, especially if you're talking about how you're managing how Google Meet or how you're managing your LMS, this would be siguro form a cluster of complaints that you would receive from teachers and also from students as well. Okay, so looking at this classification of online risk, this is basically the framework offered by Livingston and her companions. So as you can see, in terms of content, these are some of the things that pose a risk for children. In terms of contact, you have that as well. So let's just look at this table. So here you have the more aggressive, kinds of risks. In terms of content, you have, of course, the violent, gory content. No? You could imagine if, I don't know if you were disturbed by, some time ago, several video this video of this policeman gunning down this old woman and her son went viral, no? And it was just readily accessible on Facebook, no? And it was being passed around. And I happened, out of curiosity, watch it, and I was having nightmares days after that. No? But this is the type of violent content that could pose a risk to children. If we as adults are disturbed by it, how much more children who see this kind of violence happening online. Now, in terms of aggressive contact risk, of course, you have stalking, harassment. No? Kids nowadays would often joke about stalking their crushes. But here you have people who really sending messages. No? We have an instance in the university where there was an unknown account who was always harassing a particular class, no, and mentioning the name of a particular student. In a Google Meet session, there was somebody who was always trying to log in, to be admitted into it, although we have already put up controls, and Google Meet itself has controls to limit the access of those who could enter into the Meet session. Still, parang this person just keeps on messaging students who are there. No, somehow this anonymous person was able to had access to the emails of the children in that particular class. This was a grade 5 class in our grade school. No? So that's another aggressive kind of aggressive contact risk. No? Now, in terms of children, of course, you have bullying or hostile peer activity. There's a lot of shaming or bullying that's happening on in children's private chats. No? My office has received screenshots of children basically bullying each other doon sa chat box. No? So that happens even online, and that's the kind of aggressive conduct risk that children could be exposed to. The second layer here in terms of sexual online risks, of course, there's pornographic content, no? Which right now is not only readily available through sites which are really advertised as porn sites, but you have porn accessible even through Twitter or Facebook, no? Or for some, no? To bypass, for example, network security in campuses, they use parang other apps such as Reddit in order to be able to access pornographic content. So there's that. No? The other, in terms of sexual contact risk, of course, there's grooming. No? And there's also the possibility of sexual abuse on meeting up with strangers. So far in our experience, I guess I haven't really received, at least in my own experience here in the university, we haven't really received this kind of complaint, no? So far. No? But surely this might be happening behind our backs. No? Or maybe this might be happening right under our noses. But still, it's a risk that's happening. You know? The other one is in terms of sexual conduct risk. There's sexual harassment. Sorry, I forgot an A there in the spelling. Or sexting. For those of us who might not be aware of sexting, although this is a fairly old term already, it's really the passing on or the sending of not only sexually explicit or sexually provocative material among peers. No? So what has happened here, I guess we had an incident before where the boyfriend leaked some photos and some videos of an ex-girlfriend, no? And this made the rounds in group chats on Facebook. No? So that's another risk. The third risk comes in the form of values which tend to, infringe perhaps on the values that we would like to communicate to our students. So in terms of content, there could be racist and hateful content, and I guess this kind of toxicity is something that something that we experience, especially in social media. Think only of the toxic tweets that you read about on Twitter, or perhaps even being shared on Facebook. There's also the risk of, in terms of contact, ideological persuasion. Right now, some of the recruitment strategies being used by some extremist groups are being, have always been at least one of the channels in which they recruit is always through online. So there's this possibility of being persuaded or perhaps manipulated to accept a certain way of certain ideology, a certain way of thinking, which might run contrary to the values that we would like to espouse as parents or as educators. And of course, in terms of children, the risk is also to come up with potentially harmful user-generated content. Now, this may come across as something in the form of cursing that happens through group chats or through messages, even private messages through Zoom, or even being posted publicly on Twitter or on Facebook, or even parang there's kind of harassment also that can happen, or some harmful content that's being posted even on Instagram. Now, the fourth layer here is in terms of that commercially related risk. No? Of course, in terms of content, there's a possibility of your information being stolen from you. I don't know if you've seen one of the documentaries on Netflix, which what was the title? I forgot the title, but basically it was talking about the risks of social media. And one of the things there which struck me was that one of these app developers said that, well, if an application is free, don't feel happy about it, because if the app is free, then it is your identity, your information that is being sold here. So you have instances like many of us do avail of many free services. For example, Google or even Facebook are not paying for it. But the data that they're collecting from our consumption of their content is something that's also being passed around, and becomes a way of parang pushing in information to be able to market to you. So you can imagine the amount of data that you're actually giving out to companies or perhaps people who might have other intentions in mind. No? One of the ways to sort of test this is if you take a look, for example, at Facebook ads. You can choose the demographics that you want to hit as your target audience, in terms of the content that you like to post. If you haven't tried boosting your post, you can decide parang the age range, you can decide parang the location, you can decide even based on the interests that people have. So that's another risk that children do encounter. In terms of commercial contact risk, I guess this is related to what we've said earlier. It's really deliberately parang using and filching information from you in order to be able to use it for something else. We had an incident where email addresses were collected by a certain person, and it was just given away to other people, and then people suddenly started receiving spam mail. Kahit na this education, what's this .edu email, supposedly we have installed filters to be able to limit the kind of spam mail that's coming into our networks, and yet it was we could not. It's difficult to really control that once you have persons who would just fish that information and then give it out freely to other people as well. And in terms of that other commercial online risk, there's online gambling, I just would like to talk about this because this is something that often takes place, especially when it comes to online gaming. Yung mga pustahan maybe something that we are not aware of, but this happens pag maglaro ng Dota or or even ML. For those of us who don't know what ML is, that's Mobile Legends. Some form of pustahan also takes place. It's not just an innocent gaming, but students really sometimes you're using up their resources in order to be able to participate in these games, which involve some kind of gambling. So, looking at all these risks that our children encounter. I guess another document which might be helpful for our purposes is to look at what the International Telecommunication Union has published. No? This is in connection with efforts being made by UNICEF. No? They've published a set of guidelines for industry, for parents and educators, for students, no? To sort of help us in terms of how we could go about protecting children online. No? I just would like to share briefly some of the things indicated here. There's quite a number, but I've just picked out some of the things that would be pertinent to us as educators. If you look at this slide, you see here some of the recommendations for educators. One is ensuring that devices are secure and password protected. Now, I will talk about this in greater detail later. That involves also involves installing antivirus software and firewalls. No? Firewalls are really the network security that you install so that people can't just attack your network. They could either shut down the network or steal information, data from your network. Also, this one, which might be important, especially for administrators to consider, is looking at our policies in terms of how technology can be used. There's a thing that we call an acceptable use policy. Perhaps in the question and answer forum, you might want to ask about what it is like. But basically, what it is it tells you how you're supposed to use the internet, how you're supposed to use the devices that are being loaned out to you, how to use the information that circulates within your network. Now, this becomes problematic during this time because, as I said, unlike before, where much of how students or how children inside our schools would access the network would be inside the campus, where our network security assures that we have more control in terms of protecting them. But now they're just accessing it from outside, from external networks, and they're just logging in perhaps to our servers. Now there are so many things there that we do not have control over, especially when you're talking about IT security. Another thing here is it's not only images, but I think the concern here was in terms of how certain images are being passed around, and innocently some children would be posting their photos online, and this could easily be downloaded and circulated among certain networks. Some of it, as you may have been aware of, for example, teenagers. We had a case before, an incident before, where we discovered that pictures of the girls of girls were being passed around through the group chats of a group of boys. So that's one thing that could happen. But it's not only the images of students that could be at risk, but also the information that they make available online. And this becomes even more problematic because in this age of Instagram, we're always revealing too much to the world. Where we are, where we're eating, where we are at a certain point in time in the day, what's our house like, all of these are information that could be used against us. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm being paranoid about these things, but these are some of the issues that arise, especially when we're talking about securing the online identities and the online spaces of children. The other thing here you see, as you can see here, might not be relevant to us, especially at this point, because it sort of presupposes that network security is something that could be controlled by your IT department. But right now, there's really no assurance, no, for us administrators that the internet traffic that comes in would be something that we could filter and monitor. In tech parlance, parang we have what we call a whitelisting of websites. These are websites that you only make available that users can access parang within a certain network. All the rest that are not included in the whitelist could not be accessed. No? Certain point, maybe a year ago or so before COVID, no? In the Ateneo de Davao University, we had a policy in terms of Facebook use. No? So beginning at 8 a.m. until 5 p.m., no one on campus using our networks can access Facebook. Now, that might seem harsh to everyone. That policy has sort of changed nowadays. No? First, because there's really no one coming in. Secondly, parang we're sort of, I guess, becoming more liberal in terms of social media usage. So that's what it's all about. This particular recommendation. The other thing I think is something that we could do as educators in terms of incorporating programs to be able to talk about how students can use the internet responsibly. I guess many of us take it for granted because many of us, siguro, or I don't know, I wouldn't say us. No, this is real. I'm not being ageist when I say this. No, parang, but many might seem unaware, or perhaps are not really as fluent in terms of parang all these digital technological things, no, and that's why parang we're very dependent sometimes on children or young people teaching us how to do this, how to do that, no? But it's very important that we take certain steps, and this is something that they're doing in our grade school as well, no? Of teaching students in terms of responsible use of the internet. No, many times we're unaware that in fact, everything that we do online is being tracked by an application, or it's being tracked by somebody else. No? And this could be a cause of worry for some people. But I guess for many of us, we're not even as conscious about it. But you would know, especially if you've been receiving a lot of spam mail lately, that the information that you have has actually been accessed by what are called as cookies, no? And the information there is being passed around to another company, and it's being sold, and then so parang you have all these targeted marketing emails arriving in your inbox. No? Also, aside from that digital footprint, there's also our online reputation. No? I don't know if this is a concern for everyone. Certainly, maybe not a concern when you're younger. In fact, parang people like to exhibit much of their life online. No? But if one of the things about the internet is that to use it wisely is to also know how to curate, for example, your online presence. No? Now, this is a concept which Instagram influencers are aware of. No? Like this. Digital curation, and perhaps this is something that might be that you might be interested in, because I don't know how you feel about children's what could be potentially embarrassing or potentially disturbing about yourself might be scattered all over the place, no? By something that you post on Instagram or something that you share to group chat. No? As long as it's there, there's always the possibility of it spreading around, no? And therefore, it could possibly affect how people perceive you, not only online, but how people also perceive you in real life, because much of our interaction with people right now is being mediated, but by what they see in the online world. The other thing here, other recommendation is, I guess, recognizing how important it is to be able to communicate the importance of the safe and responsible use of the internet. And this means probably holding dialogues with our students just to be able to get a sense of the sites that they're visiting, what online activities they're actually doing, and so on and so forth. Now, I understand parang many of us attend to many concerns, especially during this time of online education. No? Even in the Ateneo de Davao, I guess, there's just too many things to consider when you're talking about online education. No? But this is certainly something that, we would like to pursue, no? Just to be able to get a grounded sense of where our students are and to be able to help them, no? And guide them in terms of how they use online resources and how they access it as well. I guess that's also related to the last recommendation here, which is really for us educators, no, to be able to understand the many risks, but at the same time to also recognize the benefits that children encounter, especially when they go online. No? I guess what we're trying to say here, that in as much that the internet is a wonderful place, no? Especially when we could teach our students in terms of how to use it wisely. No? So that means parang teaching them how to distinguish between fake news and what's really more a reputable and reliable source, no, of information. That's teaching them in terms of how they could manage and curate how they present themselves online, especially to their social media accounts. That means, for example, teaching them to always look at, to check in our browsers, we have those history settings, no? To always ensure, especially when they're using a public computer or a device that's being used by other people, to make sure that we clear the history and so that people can't see what you're actually visiting, or perhaps can't access the site that you've left open for other people to see. So now, I guess parang if you're to compress parang all these things, no, I find that it could really be overwhelming. But perhaps for us, parang we could think of ensuring these safe spaces in terms of first, no, looking at the hardware and software aspect of it, no. So I'd like to see it in terms of first looking at apps, then looking at devices, then looking at networks. No? So in terms of apps, there's a site which that you can check online if you want to take a look at a description of what this app is all about, no, and the level of risk that it entails, no, to be able to, in using this app. No. I will share the link later so that some of you might want to check it out. It's useful for us teachers and also for us administrators because halimbawa, if we ask you, unless there are people using it, parang yung Omegle na app, I don't know if we're aware of it. No? I don't know, parang I know a certain person na parang who was curious about it. No? Parang sabi niya, bakit ang mga student ko parang nabing nagpo-post on? Ano ba yun? No? Parang, I did want to take that opportunity to educate this friend of mine, but parang I was just laughing silently because, if you know about that app, it's really parang, in a sense, parang interesting, exciting, but at the same time dangerous because Michael allows you to meet strangers on the net. No? Parang you can just log in and whoever's in there as well, parang you can also meet up and sort of talk and look at each other's look at each other through videos, no. So yun. I guess parang in terms of parang ensuring the safe spaces, I think we have to be aware of the kinds of apps that students access, but at the same time to take a look at parang every app always has this not feature, but parang there's a fine print to every app, no. But oftentimes we don't read about it anymore, no. This fine print tells you about how it collects and uses the data whenever you're using that app. That's something that we might want to take a look at, especially when we're trying to decide in terms of what apps we could make available to students, especially now that they're working online, and also in terms of parang security features that we could think about, especially when we're using a certain app. Part of these security features there is, does it provide, for example, an option for you to delete your information, especially if you decide that you won't be using the app anymore, and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of devices, I guess parang we can refer back to what was stated earlier in terms of the recommendations. No, first thing is yun parang have we activated yung mga security features of devices. No, if you're using a computer. Some of us kasi parang tamad na, no? Na parang gusto ko pag login ko dyan, hindi na ako mag-type ng password. So we just leave it as it is. No? But notice how dangerous it could be. For example, some children are very careless about the use of their devices. Somebody who uses it could basically access parang your saved passwords, and also could enter and post things on your behalf, parang, and we see this happening, parang it's like a prank that's being used not only by children but also by adults, no. Pag may nakita kang open dyan na you post a status update and so on and so forth. And then also parang certain devices also have security features pagdating sa screen time, no. If you're using a Mac, there's a feature there for screen time where you could limit the time that you're using for certain devices, for certain applications. There's also a feature there for privacy and security. No? So these are the things that you might want to check as well in terms of devices. Now, in terms of networks, this means parang when you're setting up a home network, make sure that you've placed a password before password, so that you won't have your neighbors or anyone else parang logging into your network and potentially accessing computers who are also within that network. No. Now, on the more technical side, parang, and this is something siguro that our IT departments could take a look at, or you might want to take a look at, no, as an administrator, is to review again some of the network policies. No? In other words, look at parang what sites are being allowed by your network. No? What is it blocking? What is it not blocking? No? Look at, for example, the kind of you can review, for example, ano ba yung which IP addresses are constantly accessing, for example, your networks, no? And saan ba yung parang heavy traffic usually? Where is it coming from? No? So this can give us an indication of potential threats or potential attacks to our networks. No? Now, the other thing, if kanina we're talking about hardware and software, dito siguro parang we're talking about humanware. No? First, and here, parang I think these are areas that we could continue to ensure that spaces online will be safe. No? In terms of, first, how we manage our personal data. Second, in terms of policies that we draft parang within our campuses, no? Especially in terms of how technology and how the network is going to be used. And the third is really in terms of parental mediation. No? So in terms of policies and procedures, no, as I said, it's always a good thing to be able to look at or perhaps to check if your school has an acceptable use policy. No? Some are not really aware of it because yun nga, sometimes yung IT department fades into the background and they only come to the foreground pag may problema ka na sa internet. No? But usually IT departments would have their own acceptable use policy. No? Here in the Ateneo de Davao, I'm sure parang many of our faculty and students here are not aware of it. No? But we do have an acceptable use policy. And this sort of determines, as I said, parang how technologies, how devices, and how internet is being used within the university. Second is really to make sure that to be more conscious of the data that you put in. No? That means parang being conscious of giving out one's emails, no, or telephone numbers. Although in many apps, especially if you're signing up, these are some of the things that are being asked of you. Although there are many things that you could use in order to skirt around this limitation, no? But parang very few yon. Parang one of the things that I personally use is, for example, if you have an Apple ID account, no? Sometimes now they require Apple, provides a way for you to be able to log into a particular application or site without specifically giving away your real email or your phone number. So that's a feature that parang we might want to avail as well, especially when we're trying to manage our data. But really, parang in the concrete, it's just making sure na parang parang it's really parang teaching our students to be more judicious in terms of the information that they put out, no? To not just carelessly give it out when somebody asks this information online, to be more conscious, for example, of emails being sent or details that you put in, no? or social media posts that you that you put up online. And then the third part is really, again, and I think this might be important, especially for children studying online, no? Parental mediation. But I guess, despite the fact that this is one of the major helps in terms of ensuring that children are protected online, I guess parang what our parents might need is really parang some kind of information that so that they're also really aware of the kind of risks that are the children encounter online. Many of our parents, as I said, parang may not be aware of it. Maybe some of us also parang are not really as digitally fluent. But this might take the form of really parang conducting more seminars for parents, no? So that they could journey with their students, with their children, especially since we are, for the most part, still going online in terms of how we deliver our, in terms of our educational delivery. So, having said that, I guess these are in broad strokes some of the things that we might want to consider, especially when we're talking about how we could secure our children online. You might, if you want, ask for further details about it, especially during the question and answer forum. But I guess for now, I'll just end with that and perhaps lead you to sort of just consider, again, if you're thinking in terms of the concrete, in terms of what you need to be aware of, in terms of infrastructures to be able to help protect children online, think in terms of apps, in terms of devices, in terms of networks. And also to accompany that concern for hardware and software, think of policies that you can institute as a school. Think of how you could encourage people to be more conscious of the personal data that they put out online. And third is to perhaps encourage our parents to take a more proactive role in terms of educating and guiding their children as they go online. So I guess with that, I end my talk, and thank you very much for having me here, and I feel privileged to be able to share these things with you. So good morning to all.
Thank you very much, Father Ogi, for that very informative and eye-opening talk. We will now proceed to the second talk for this session. Our second speaker, Dr. Melba Laguna Manapol, RSW, is an associate professor and the chairperson of the Social Work Department of Ateneo de Davao University. She's teaching both at the undergraduate and graduate programs of the Social Work Department and at the graduate program of the School of Education. She's a member of the University Community Engagement and Advocacy Council and manages the implementation of the Healing and Recovery Program for Surrenders, project of the Center Against Illegal Drugs of the university. Let us now listen to Dr. Melba Laguna Manapol.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Melba Manapol. I'm with the Ateneo de Davao University, and I'm a registered social worker. I will be talking with you the guidelines and procedures in handling cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. On screen are, sorry. On screen is the outline of my presentation. So I'll start with the video presentation with the title Child Protection, Get Informed, Protect Children. Then I will discuss case management of children who are abused, neglected, and exploited, who may report and to whom may one report a case of child abuse. Then how intake, interview, and assessment is conducted by social workers. And then child protection in schools. And later, I will also end with a video presentation of a safe environment for children in school. So to start with my presentation, let us listen and watch the film. So those are just among the cases of children, cases of abuse and exploitation and neglect experienced by our children. Now, how do we manage cases of abuse? In the Protocol for Case Management of Child Victims of Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation, a document published in 2014 by the Committee for the Special Protection of Children. Case management is defined as a procedure to plan, seek, and monitor services from different social agencies and staff on behalf of a client. Usually, one agency takes primary responsibility for the client and assigns a case manager who coordinates services, advocates for the client, and sometimes controls resources and purchases services for the client. The following are the approaches that were adopted by the protocol that were published in 2014. First, holistic care, that is to ensure full or optimum development of the child. So considering the whole holistic development of the child from physical, emotional, mental, cognitive, psychological, and spiritual. And then second approach is the rights-based and life cycle approach. This is to ensure that the rights of the child are upheld throughout the different stages of the child's growth and development. Then the protocol also adopted family and community-based approach. No? It recognizes that families and communities are the first line of response in dealing with problems of children. Thus, interventions in trying to strengthen the capability of families and communities is a must. No? And then a gender-sensitive approach. We recognize that there is a difference, no, in terms of how men and women are dealt with. So that's the next the fourth approach. Then the last, the case management of our children should be multidisciplinary in approach. No? It recognizes the children, particularly those in need of special protection, need access to an array of services due to the multifaceted nature of their needs. Okay. The management of child abuse cases is multi-sectoral, so we have to emphasize that the national and the local government, agencies, non-government and faith-based organizations, civic and private sectors should be involved in dealing with abuse cases. And multidisciplinary, of course. No? So the police, prosecutor, judge, the lawyer, social workers, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, barangay officials, among others, should be helping, no, in terms of dealing with our cases. So working together as a team to provide appropriate protection in terms of legal and social services to the child victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Shown on screen is actually the flow, no, of our in dealing with our abuse cases. Who can report? Anybody can report actually, no? So to the barangay, to PNP, to the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or our local social welfare and development offices. And there are also mandatory reporters. I will explain this in a while. So in terms of filing of complaint, this is the process that we usually go through. So there's inquest, preliminary investigation, and then filing of information to court, going to court, and then warrant of arrest is issued. And then another this one preliminary investigation. Tapos kung if there's no enough evidence, then the case is dismissed. But I'd like to take note. I'd like to point out that highlight that there is also another support that we need to provide to our victims, no? So psychosocial and other support. So there should be healing, recovery, and reintegration, or independent living, or look for a new community for integration. So who may report, or to whom may one report a case of child abuse? So as mentioned earlier, any person may report either orally or in writing a case of child abuse, neglect, or exploitation. The report may be made to any of the following: the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Commission on Human Rights, or to the local Social Welfare and Development Office. No? So it's present in all municipalities, cities, and provinces. You can also file your complaint or you can report to the Philippine National Police or the National Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement agencies. Punong barangay or tribal leader, barangay kagawad, any member of the barangay council for the protection of children. I hope that everyone is aware that there is this structure for every barangay. And barangay help desk person or violence against women, or VAUC help desk. So violence against women and children help desk officer. Again, these are all, this structure is present in every barangay, supposedly. The following government workers have the duty to report all incidents of possible child abuse. No? Teachers and administrators in public schools, probation officers, government lawyers, the law enforcement officers, no, PDEA and other law enforcement officers, barangay officials, correction officers, and other government officials and employees whose work involves dealing with children. We also have mandatory reporters. No? So the following are mandated to make a report, either orally or in writing, to the Department of Social Welfare and Development or the local Social Welfare and Development offices within 48 hours. So the examination and or treatment of a child who appears to have suffered from abuse. So sino sila? No? Who are they? They're the head of any public or private hospital, medical clinic, and similar institutions, and attending physician and nurse. Why are they mandatory? Because for failure to report a child abuse case, they should be there's a penalty, no, of not more than 2,000 pesos, or as may be determined in the future by a court with jurisdiction. Now, this is how we do it, no, in social work. Once the case is referred to the local Social Welfare and Development Office or the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or any agencies working with children, they're supposed to have a social worker who will take the interview, no, intake interview and assessment. So if a rescue operation is not necessary, the social worker usually conducts within 48 hours from the complaint a visit to the child's home if the abuse happens at home, and then at school, if the abuse happened at school, the workplace, or where the abusive exploitative situation is allegedly taking place. If the report is made by a person who witnessed the abuse or exploitation, interview that person. So the social worker actually interviews that person to gather information about the situation, who is involved, how it happened, and what actions have been done relative to child situation. The social worker gets contact details of the reporting party and assure that person's protection and anonymity. Okay. What about if the child is accompanied by a parent? So supposing the parent actually disclosed, no, or reported the incident, a guardian or any adult The social worker usually conducts separate interviews of the child victim and the accompanying adult, then address the accompanying adult's fears and concerns regarding the child's safety and situation. So it happened to us. No, there was an instance where we were called because the child not disclosed that she was being abused by her father. No, so and then the mother also knew the situation. We were called to assist. No, so our social worker went to the school and then um, actually conduct interviews separately with the child and the child's parents. And together, the social worker and the parties did some planning, no, to resolve or to address the issue. It's happening, no? Yung cases of incest sometimes with our students is a real situation. Number four, immediately attend to the child's needs, such as food, rest, sleep, and others, to stabilize the child's physical and psychological state. Make an immediate referral to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or bring the child to the nearest hospital if the child is suicidal or exhibiting bizarre behavior, or if the child is really injured, no? So in case of physical abuse. Immediately assess, no, the child's safety and risks in the child's current environment. Initial actions by the social worker, depending on the child's situations, includes the following. No? So contacting child's parents or legal guardians, assess their parenting capability and the risks on child's safety. If initial assessment shows that the parents are able to protect the child, particularly if they are not the perpetrator, then the child may be released to them, or the child continues to stay with them under the supervision of a social worker and monitored by the barangay. Now, what happens if the parents are incapable of protecting the child? Now, so if the parents are incapable of protecting the child or cannot be contacted or unavailable, the next thing to do is to contact child's relatives and other significant persons. This is for possible temporary care of child under the supervision, again, of the social worker and monitored by the barangay. So if there are no alternative carers, refer the child for temporary care to a child caring institution or foster home duly licensed and accredited or managed by the Department of Social Welfare and Development. And then if medical attention is needed, immediately refer to a women child protection unit or a hospital or a clinic. Now, if the alleged perpetrator is the child's parent or a family member, this is very difficult to handle. Caution must be exercised when notifying the family. So a decision not to notify the child's parents or guardian shall be reached only after consultation with the police and the examining physician. And this should be assessed based on further risk or danger to the child. Second, the possibility of flight risk, no, of the alleged perpetrator. And third, compromising police investigation. Then there's also a need to conduct collateral interviews and gather evidence that will either corroborate or negate the allegation of abuse. If corroborated, schedule a thorough assessment of the case to determine the child's need for continuing protection. Okay. Immediately convene a case conference, no, with the other disciplines and agencies directly involved with the case, and document result of the assessment plan and the intervention process. I mentioned earlier that management or handling cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation requires a multi-sectoral and multidisciplinary approach. So in this case conference, this is where the team is or talk about the case of the child. No? So multidisciplinary case conference should be convened by a social worker, acting as case manager or the earliest possible time, specifically as follows. So either of these four situations. So before placing the child under protective custody, there should be a multidisciplinary case conference conducted immediately after investigation of serious physical abuse, sexual abuse, or life-threatening neglect to determine suspension or termination of parental authority. For social workers, this is very um, this situation puts most of the social workers in the dilemma, no? Kasi in some cases, if there is serious threat, no, on the child has to be placed in a custodial or protective custody of the Department of Social Welfare and Development or the local social welfare and development offices. In effect, you remove the child from his or her family. Then third, 3 months after granting of petition of involuntary commitment by the court, and for periodic assessment of the case and planning and monitoring of intervention and progress. If the case is handled and shared by at least two of the following, local social welfare development social worker, women and children protection unit, the NGO social worker or social worker at the temporary shelter or foster home, the one with the main responsibility over the case will call the conference. No? So as may deemed necessary, the other social worker may also call the conference. The case manager shall invite those who directly work with the child or have relevant knowledge about the child and family. Other professionals who may likely be involved in any follow-up action may be invited. So if the case is actually took place if the abuse happened in school, administrators and some representatives of the school will probably be also invited. In any context other than that of child protection, information given and shared during the case conference is confidential and shall not be disclosed, no, to any other person or agency without permission of the contributor and the case manager. Now, the focus of the case conference is not only the prosecution of the abuser, but primarily the protection of the child. So in this conference, the team will have to look into the different aspects, no, of the child's needs. So if there are needs for psychological, then appropriate intervention should be given. If there's a need for legal, then the lawyer in the team should be able to help, and so on. It is not only the subject child who shall be the sole focus of the intervention, but all the other children in the household. There must be risk and needs assessment of all the children in the household. This is particularly important if the case is incest. No? The perpetrator is a relative and is staying at home. So, kunyari, father or any or uncle and is staying at home. No? In the time of the pandemic, the incidence of this kind of sexual abuse actually increased, no? Because at some point the perpetrators stay at home. So ang need is to really look into the risk, no, that or the danger that that the other children at home will also be abused. And so there are important is to really assess, no, whether to let the children stay at home or come up with some plans to allow the children to stay with relatives or under the protective custody of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. During the pandemic, this kind of sexual abuse actually increased. No, I have a group that assisted in the psychological first aid. We call ourselves United Registered Social Workers, and we have a number of cases where we have to rescue children at home and ask the local social welfare and development office to really intervene, get the children, and process the children, and do some intervention with the children because the perpetrator is at home. So members shall consider the following. No? So the level of risk of the child and other children in the household. There's also welfare planning to protect the child. In any case, these are the three possible options: to return the child to live with parents or guardian, or to live with relatives, or to remove from home and be placed in a temporary shelter or at a foster home. Then the need to look into the parenting capability, the opinion of the child, subject child, of course, should matter, and the need to involve other members of the family. Now I'd like to just show to you know what is child protection in schools. No? Kasi most of us here are either administrators or a member of a particular school. I got this from a YouTube, a blog of a publication at, I think by DepEd. No? So in this report, it shows here that cases or incidents of bullying in schools is on the rise. No? The data is just until 2016, but I don't know, no, during the pandemic, if there are also cases. I think there are, but no consolidated cases yet. But this one shows, no, that cases of abuse happen also in school. And so the need for us to look into how we protect our children in school. Note that there are also efforts to protect children. There are laws and legislations already in place in terms of protecting our children. So you have the child protection policy. I hope you are all familiar with this. I'll just go through with some of the salient points of the child protection policy later, because it's one of our advocacy that one of these days, all of the schools, no, should have been able to establish and implement their own child protection policy in every school, no, be it private and public school. There's also policy protecting children in armed conflict. No? And then we have the Anti-Bullying Act, and there are guidelines on CAR and CICL. CICL is Children in Conflict with Law. So I'll focus my discussion on the child protection policy. This is DepEd Order number 42, series of 2012. No? According to this policy, it's a zero tolerance policy for any act of child abuse, exploitation, violence, discrimination, bullying, and other related offenses. No? So I hope you are familiar with this, and I hope that most of the schools here have establish their own child protection policy. But I'm happy that CEAP has a committee on child protection. These are just some of the salient points. So, ano ba yung duties of the school under this policy? No? So first, the school should ensure the institution of effective child protection policy, ensure that the school adopts CPP, ensure that all learners, guardians, parents, custodians, visitors, and guests are made aware of the child protection policy. So there has to be mechanisms to allow or to let our learners, our guardians, parents, and all those who are coming to school made aware of the child protection policy. There's a need to also convene a child protection committee in schools. So every school should have CPC. Number 5, conduct activities for the Child Protection Committee and teachers. Conduct disciplinary proceedings in cases committed by our pupils, students, or learners. 7, ensure that participatory and other rights of children are respected and upheld in all matters and procedures affecting their welfare. Number 8, maintain a record of all proceedings related to bullying and peer abuse for submission. Submission probably to the district office, to the Department of Education, or to appropriate agency. 9, conduct appropriate training and capability building activities on child protection and coordinate with the Department of Social Welfare and Development or appropriate non-government agencies, NGOs on child protection hotline. Okay, the Child Protection Committee should be present, no, in all public and private elementary and secondary schools. This is a requirement by the Child Protection Policy Law. So, who are members of the CPC, as suggested here, you have the school head, administrator, the guidance counselor, a teacher, teacher representative, parent representative, student representative, and there has to be barangay representative. No? If I may add, if a school has probably some guidance, some psychologists and social workers, they can be also considered as member of the Child Protection Committee. So, what does the Child Protection Committee do? No? What are the tasks and responsibilities? First, to initiate school child protection policy, information dissemination program and activities. Initiate coordination with women and child protection desks, no? The local social welfare and development office and other agencies. Second task is to develop and implement school-based referral and monitoring system for identifying students at risk, and develop and implement positive and effective measures of procedures in child support. And third important task, the Child Protection Committee should ensure assistance to parents and guardians. Because in your previous discussions, I think it was emphasized the important role of the family, the parents and the guardians in terms of child protection. And then ensure identification, referral, and reporting of cases, and ensure that respect for child rights in matters affecting their welfare. So these are the suggested tasks and functions of the Child Protection Committee of every school. Oh, I would like to emphasize that private schools are not exempted from this policy. No? Section 23 of the Department Order 42, or the Child Protection Policy of 2012, states that private schools shall be responsible for promulgating a school child protection policy, including a policy on bullying, a protocol for reporting, and procedures for handling management of cases consistent with these policies and guidelines. So you are not exempted if you are in a private school. Teneo is also not exempted. Now I'd like to show to you this video on keeping safe, our safe environment for our children in school.
In 2017, the government of Tuvalu made a stand to protect the rights of all children in our country. This means schools cannot physically discipline children or threaten to physically discipline children, and if they do, there will be big consequences, which may include the involvement of police and courts. Esala is 10 years old and is very disrespectful to elders. He swears, fights with other children, and makes fun of his classmates and teachers. This got Esala into a lot of trouble and hurt. But the truth is, most of the time Esala is afraid. He is afraid because he is alone. Things are difficult for Esala at home. He has to hide from his dad most nights because he never knows whether his dad will come home angry and hurt him and his mom. One time, Esala asked an uncle for help, but his uncle didn't believe him. Esala carries the weight of this with him, sometimes in ways even he doesn't understand. All of this has impacted Esala's ability to participate in school. And like Esala, many children, for different reasons, can struggle to manage their emotions, which can lead to children displaying difficult behavior in the classroom. This behavior is often linked to feelings that are harder to see. Some children, like Esala, have difficulties at home. Some are being bullied, and others might be struggling with health issues. There are many other challenges children may be struggling with that we may never see. Corporal punishment in all its forms is no longer allowed in schools.
When we physically punish students or children, we are actually giving them one choice, and that choice is to do what you want them to do, and therefore it limits their cognitive aspect, so they won't learn.
It is our hope and it is our prayer. May all the teachers in Tuvalu, either primary schools or secondary schools, can teach the instructions given out by the servant of the Lord, St. Paul, to become good, to become ready, to teach our children to know how to do love, care, forgiving, and also trusting others. Well, those are the fruit of the Spirit. When you teach the child through its grown-up age, by the time when it is old, he will never forget those teaching. They will stick to his or her mind when he's grown up.
Let us be positive with our approach and with our treatment to the children. Rules and the boundaries should be set in a positive way. Instead of saying in the classroom rules, don't run, let us say walk.
If we talk to the children in a proper way, with a proper voice, proper language, proper behavior, then there won't be any misunderstanding between us and the children. And I also believe that the kids will respect us because we are not doing anything wrong to them. Before you use violence, you have to think first of the consequences of your action.
Across the world, the use of corporal punishment is associated with poor life and learning outcomes for children. Use of corporal punishment is associated with issues later in life, such as low school attendance, unemployment, bullying behaviors, criminal behavior, and use of violence against family and community. Corporal punishments only teaches fear. While disciplining children is important, choosing to use non-physical approaches to discipline allows opportunities for children to learn about how to make positive life choices and consider the impact of their behaviors on others. The best way for you to teach students about the fruit of the Spirit is through being a role model. Children will learn as they watch you interact with them and others in the classroom. Through showing children kindness, patience, self-control, and respect, you are demonstrating the behavior you want to see in the community. It starts with you.
Thank you, and I'd like to end with this quote, my presentation with this quote. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men and women. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Melba, for a very comprehensive talk on handling cases of abuses, neglect, and exploitation, and for sharing with us those videos that are very eye-opening. Now, at this point, we shall now play a 2-minute video from our partner, Tech Factor.
The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in school closures all across the globe. But even in these uncertain times, education must continue.
Rodrigo Duterte says he won't allow students to go back to school
for a one-size
continue
operating
distance learning.
They have
She is talking about the shift to distance learning.
through this method teachers deliver lessons outside the traditional classroom setup.
As a leading provider of e-learning materials in the country, Tech Factors Incorporated is committed in helping you and your students experience positive teaching and learning environment inside or even outside the physical classroom.
The DepEdu, we will not anymore have these face-to-face classes with our students. We asked Tech Factor if we can convert to TechTeach. And I'm happy because they agreed to that proposal. So we have scheduled trainings already for our teachers.
The way Tech Factors are handling their schools and the teachers is very accommodating and very commendable because they are there from time to time whenever we need guidance and help in terms of the LMS, in terms of the content.
Congratulations for coming up with very good, effective, relevant, and useful learning materials.
Tech Factors is continuously finding ways to adapt and to adjust in this new normal. I am convinced that being partners with TFI is a big help in this time of new normal.
Tech Factors Incorporated, making learning a great experience. For more information, visit us at www.techfactors.com.
back. Welcome to the question and answer portion. Before we proceed, may I just remind you again that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link is already posted in the comment section of this page and on our Facebook page. Please note that the link will be live only from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. Again, the link to the evaluation will go live from 11:30 to 5 p.m. today. Please accomplish and submit the evaluation forms and you will receive your certificate of attendance within the next 3 to 5 days. Please note also that the PowerPoint slides of all webinars will be made available at the CEAP website, www.ceap.org.ph, ready for downloading. So the materials of the past webinars are all there, and we will also upload the ones used today. Before we begin our Q&A, allow me to greet Father Tom Avila, who is celebrating his sacerdotal anniversary today. He is the regional trustee of CEAP Region 11. Happy anniversary, Father Tom Avila. And also, Father Nono Alfonso, the executive director of GESCOM, on his 50th birthday. Happy birthday, Father Nono. God bless you and your mission. Now, let me read some comments from our Google Docs. Okay. From Mirna Bandad. What a very enlightening talk on how to protect our children from numerous online risks. Thanks, CEAP. Vivian Mascarinas. Thank you, Father Ulysses, for such an informative and eye-opening talk from MDC to Bigon, Bohol. From Ms. Amable Bautista, very informative and applicable to the present situation that we have right now. Thank you, CEAP. From Sister Jane Villador, AMP, very good tips for our guidance personnel to work on with their clients. From Vilma Ismael, thank you very much, Father Ulysses, for refreshing information regarding the use of different apps and websites. Okay, and Miss from Amory Lenteria, thank you, Father Ulysses and Doc Melba, an eye-opener for both parents and teachers. From Miss Cecilia Alvarez, congrats CEAP team, thank you, and congrats Miss Olet, Miss Father Ulysses and Doc Melba. From Joe Chef, thank you, CEAP, and to the speakers. Indeed, a very meaningful encounter, so to speak. From Julie Ibanez, thank you and congratulations. It was a meaningful and informative topics. Thanks to our excellent resource speakers. Hashtag CEAP Cares. Okay. And from our trustees, from Teresita A. Arcos Surot, Directress of Holy Family School and member of the National Basic Education Commission, watching from Holy Family School of Quezon City, Inc. Greet also Father Jobert Villasis, Region 6 Trustee and Chairperson of the National Higher Education Commission, who is watching from Aklan Catholic. Father Jobert, thank you very much. Okay. And some more greetings. Elvira Amejo, good morning po. Watching from St. Ezekiel Moreno High School, Taytay, Palawan. And from Marley Torres, good morning to all. God bless CEAP, watching from UPHSD College Guidance. Claire Solomon, good morning po. Watching from Alicia Isabel. Mukhang marami tayong participants ngayon, no? Sa iba't ibang mga lugar. Okay, so now we shall start the question and answer for portion for our speakers, Father Ogie and Doc Melba. Okay, from Luz V's Cabrillas, good morning. May I ask, what do you suggest to working parents who just left their children to their modules? Thus, they cannot monitor their children's use of social media. I think this question can be answered by Father Ogie.
Nakamute.
Right. Good morning po. I think that's really a difficult thing because when we're giving out devices to our children, oftentimes parang we just give it to them and parang we don't really tweak the settings anymore. So I guess parang parents need to have a certain awareness, and as I said, parang this isn't really our practice here, no, because oftentimes parang the parents are clueless about the devices and they're just parang relying on their children to alam mo yan, so ano bang gusto mo, pag binili mo parang bibilin lang tapos po parang ikaw na bahala dyan, no. And that's why it's really quite difficult, no, to monitor how children are using their devices. That's one. The second thing is pagdating sa social media, ito po yung mahirap dito because we can't really in a sense control parang how our children would use social media, no. Although yun nga parang kasi it's easy to just fake your birth, let's say your birth date or even your name. So it's really going to be very difficult. So I think really as prescribed by the recommendations from research, it really has to be, the parents need to sort of mediate in a sense of parang telling children how to surf the net or how to use their social media to just inform. Pero ito din po yung difficulty because children in a sense value their privacy and usually they don't tell you about the sites they're visiting or the friends that they have. And in fact, parang it's one of the cringiest experience for children to have their parents, specifically siguro parang if your child is already a teenager, kahit na nga adult ako, parang my mother is in my Facebook network. Parang it's actually a cringy feeling to have my mother comment on my posts. But I guess it's the same way, and it's even more difficult, especially for children. So ang ano po niyan, parang I don't think you could really monitor their social media consumption. But you could, sit them down and have a talk about it, or perhaps even as you give them devices, parang that you could already look at parental controls in the settings of the devices. Meron pong kanyan, meron pong function in terms of how to do it. If it's a laptop, you can easily set up a child account, no? And yun, pero ang problema nga kasi parents are not aware of parang what's under the hood. So ang anak ang may alam ng lahat ng password kasi pag ang parent usually, anak, ano ba yung password dito? Pati password ng sarili mong social media account. Tinatanong mo sa anak mo. So in our context, parang it's the child who's actually gatekeeping your access to the internet. It's not the other way around. So I guess we need to have parang siguro we need to strategize in terms of how we could increase not only our children's digital fluency, but maybe if schools could have something for parents as well. No? I think that might be a better approach because right now, parang given the practicalities of, the context in which we are, parang in which the context of parents' awareness or even knowledge about these devices or even apps, parang talaga, there's a big digital gap between our children and the parents themselves.
Thank you, Father Augie, no? I agree with you, no? The first thing that we have to do is really to educate our parents when it comes to technology, right? Oo. Para at least alam nila kung paano rin i-monitor yung mga mga anak nila, lalo na ngayon na ang nagmo-monitor sa bahay ay ang mga parents, right po? Dahil nga sa sitwasyon natin sa pandemya. Thank you very much, Father Augie. So, for our next question, this is for Doc Melba. When do you say to discipline a child be considered already a child abuse? Where do you draw the line?
Okay. Lagi we are guided by our yung rights of the child, no? Lagi nating balikan yon. So in terms of disciplining the child, for as long as it does not affect, no, the physical, mental, psychological, emotional well-being, then that is acceptable, no? Pero pag kunyari sinasaktan natin ng bata, it's not acceptable kasi we are not supposed to hurt, no, children. So pag meron silang pagkakamali, we can talk to them, no? Pwede namang kausapin eh. Pwedeng gumamit ng mga positive ways rather than negative, no? Kahit na yung ating pagsasalita, no, even the way we talk to them, we should be very careful because whether we like it or not, minsan we don't know, no, that that the words that come out of our mouth comes out of our mouth ay nakakasakit sa mga bata in terms of emotions, no. Minsan parents are not aware, no, na merong effect yung mga sinasabi nilang salita din sa bata, no? Sometimes we are blaming yung ating sometimes we cannot help but blame, no. So yon, we blame, we use words that are for the children rather than helping them, ay lalong nakakaano ng kanilang self-esteem. So things like this, we should be very careful. Disiplina, pwede naman natin gawin without actually hurting them, no? Without doing corporal punishment or yan.
Thank you, Doc Melba. Yeah, I agree with you. No, we should be mindful. Parents should be mindful of the way they talk and the tone of their voice to our daughters and sons. No, sa amin na lang sa guidance. Sometimes they tell us, no, na minsan pinapagalitan sila. So and they carry that hanggang high school. No, may sama pala sila ng loob. It's only pag malakas ng loob nila to talk to their parents, that's the time na nasasabi nila sa parents nila. And then the parents will realize na may nasaktan ko pala siya. No? Wala naman palang intensyon ng parents to hurt them. No? But they were just disciplining their sons and daughters. Yeah. So we have to be mindful.
Not just parents, I think teachers. Tayo sa eskwelahan minsan, no, we say things that we don't mean, but for children or for our students, minsan that's a big deal for them.
I agree with you. I agree. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Melba. I think this one is again for you. From Cleopatra Daisy Aguinaldo. What if the abused student shared the case to a teacher, but the student refused to cooperate in reporting the case to proper authority and manifesting resistance on this? How can we be able to help him, her? Is there any violation if we report this case, even if he does not consent with it?
The teacher probably can refer first the child to guidance counselor. Maybe the guidance counselor can convince the child na pwede siyang i-report because that's a violation of the law on exploitation and neglect. So yon. Or I think we have the duty to report eh. So kailangan nating report and allow the authorities to do their work, no? So kunyari pag na-report siya to the local social welfare and development office, or if you of the barangay ba or the city or municipality, then the social worker talks to the child, no? So pag hindi pa rin, then wala tayong magagawa doon kasi if the child does not want to report it. Pero kailangan meron tayong intervention doon sa child. Not necessary reporting, no? Most cases, ang initial kasi ayaw talagang mag-report eh. But, ang abuse na child ay meron ng mga trauma or kaya meron ng mga nangyayari sa kanyang loob, no? So I think that alone we should make sure, no, na merong appropriate intervention on the child. So kailangan kausapin at kailangan bigyan ng kanyang ano yung mga needs na ma-identify niya. Reporting is just one thing, no? But ang most important is, I think, the psychosocial and emotional well-being of the child. So, kunyari na-report siya sa, nag-disclose sa teacher, no? So, pwede naman nating, I think, dito kailangan talagang ma-implement natin yung child protection policy natin. There should be a child protection committee bawat eskwelahan that should discuss, no, ano yung mga appropriate intervention natin dun sa bata. Huwag nating hayaan na yung bata ay manatili dun sa kanyang fear na mag-report, no. But I think that if the child is assured na merong support na ibibigay sa kanya at meron siyang mga ways, no, forward, I think yung fear of reporting later on ay pwedeng matanggal, no. We have a case na hinandel na ganyan. It's pero later on kasi they managed to just say we will not put I don't want my father to go to prison. Kasi tatay niya no? Kaya ang ginawa namin with the mother ay to come up with ways na para maiwasan na that the abuse to happen again. Preventive na lang siya, no? Kasi ayaw niyang i-report ito, ayaw niyang makulong ang tatay niya kasi pag ginawa niya yon, totoo naman, no? Pag ang tatay niya ay nakulong, mawawalan sila ng economic lifeline because that means that the father will not be able to work. So the interventions there should involve the mother and the other relatives para lang maiwasan yung maulit, no, yung abuse. And then we refer also the child to psychological intervention.
Doc Melba, would you, if the perpetrator is the father, would you recommend na ihiwalay yung father? Does it mean aalis siya sa bahay?
It's dangerous if ang bata ay may kapatid. Okay. Usually, in most cases, tinatanggal natin yung bata sa family, no? We allow the child, either we allow the child to stay in a relative or dun sa custodial or protective custody of appropriate authorities, no? Sa agency, sa DSWD or what. But may mga instances na yung client ayaw. Kaya kailangan makausap yung members of the family so that ma-prevent yung further abuse, no, dun sa children. Kasi delikado. Kunyari may kapatid siya, tapos tinanggal mo siya, iniwan mo yung kapatid. That's very dangerous, no. In the case of the na-handle namin yung aming estudyante, worried siya na pag magstay siya dun sa, kasi siya college na siya, no. So nag-enroll na siya sa college. And it's also fortunate that when we met her in senior high, pagpasok niya ng college, pumasok siya sa social work, no? So we were able to really handle her case, no? So siya mismo as a child, she does not want to leave, no? Kasi worried siya sa mother niya and worried siya sa mga kapatid niya, no? So I think that giving them also orientation and educating them about all these things will also make them aware, no, of their situation, and so they are able to decide for themselves.
You know, I agree with you, Doc Melba, because we have handled also some cases, no? Ang pinakamahirap sa bata, yung dilemma niya, kasi she's emotionally attached to dun sa parents, or dun minsan sa perpetrator, minsan the father, or minsan the mom, no? So, ang hirap para sa kanya, and nagkakaroon ng guilt feeling yung bata. Oo. Kasi iniisip niya na siya yung nag-cause nung break dun sa family, no? So, ang hirap tuloy. Kaya minsan hindi sila agad-agad nakakapagsabi, no? Pinag-aaralan, pinag-iisipan nilang mabuti. Oo. But if the father is medyo ko ngayon, can we not remove the father from the house and just he sends the financial assistance to the family?
Pwede naman if we have connections, no? So for example, kunyari nagtatrabaho siya sa isang workplace, you can go directly to the boss, no, to the employer, and request, no, na i-transfer muna yung father. We cannot, Kasi kung gusto mo ng force naman, i-report mo siya, so tatanggalin siya doon, tapos pupunta siya sa police and for investigation and no? So makukulong siya kasi meron, especially if may mga evidences yon. Pero kung ayaw ng family, kasi lifeline nga nila no? So nagtatrabaho ang father, ang mother hindi. So yun, probably we can ask the employer and request, no? So pwede siguro on if I don't know, from the school, or if you have a social worker, or you can request the local social worker to come up with yung mechanisms para maayos na sana ay nang hindi talaga natin muna kino-confront yung tatay kasi medyo mahirap yon, no? So yun, pwedeng request for transfer for him, no? It happened to this, no? Sinasabi nung bata, pwede bang puntahan natin yung boss ng aking tatay, tapos ipalipat natin siya para hindi na siya umuwi dito.
I see. If the case is, let's say, the child is staying with the grandparents and the mother has her own family and there is no father, and then the grandparents are very strict and traditional and then very harsh when they punish, what will happen to the child? Like, say napapalo siya,
sino pumapalo? Yung mother?
The grandparents siguro.
Pwede kasi i-report yun kasi merong talaga yung mga bata meron silang protection. We can report, no, the case. You can file a case to the grandmother. Actually, no. Filing a case does not mean na ilalagay mo siya talaga sa kulungan. No? By filing the case, reporting that abuse is happening para ma-prevent siya at para ma-warn din yung grandparent. So part nung intervention probably pag na-report na siya, we can talk to the grandmother. Kasi baka sinauna no? So duman din ako dun sa mga kinukuro tayo, di ba? Baka nandun pa sa panahon na yon yung grandmother. No?
Yeah.
So baka pwedeng kausapin at saka i-redirect lang yung frame of mind na at this point in time ay hindi na mag-work yung ating mga corporal punishment dyan. So pwedeng gano'n, no? So sometimes we are kung member tayo ng family, nakikita natin yung ating yung ating mother na sinasaktan ng bata. Kung ako yung mother, so kakausapin ko si grandmother nang hindi naririnig ng bata kasi baka lumaki din ang ulo ng bata, no? So you can talk to your mother or your father or whoever it is that is abusing the child, no? Yan kung nakita mong talagang sinasaktan niya kasi baka minsan kung report yon itatanggi niya rin, no? So yan. If hindi talaga madala, then you can just report, no? Pero kung family member natin ito, pag sinabihan natin, sige, report kita, no? Merong Bantay Bata 163 or no, pwedeng tawagan. May hotline tayo na 163. Enforce pa yan ngayon, no? National. So pwedeng tumawag pa rin dun sa number na yon kung merong reporting, no, para ma-facilitate. Merong mga social workers naman ng Bantay Bata that will deal with the report.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doc Melba. Now, to enrich our session this morning, we're happy to have with us a sharer from Colegio San Agustin, Makati. She was an art teacher in the grade school department of CSA for 28 years and currently the Alternative Learning System Associate for the grade school department and the vice chairperson of the CSA Child Protection Committee. Let us welcome Ms. Maria Licia Laig Rivadelo. Welcome, Licia.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
It's a pleasure for me to be here with you right now. First of all, I'd like to thank our speakers, Father Ulysses and Dr. Melba, for their informative and timely sharing today. We learned a lot from them.
Thank you. And thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, Ms. Licia, perhaps you can share with us how the Colegio San Agustin's Child Protection Committee was formed, as well as some programs and practices of CSA in relation to child protection in this new setup of online learning.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Olette. I'd like to share with you how CSA Makati created the Child Protection Committee. It was on September 28, 2012, and it was in pursuant to DepEd Order number 40, Series 2012 of RA 10627, known as the Child Protection Policy. The first members were appointed by then school rector Father Horacio R. Rodriguez, OSA. They were representatives from the following departments: Guidance Center, the Preschool Department, grade school and high school departments, and the Supreme Student Council. Now, the barangay and the PTA sent their own representatives. The position of chairman of our CPC is assigned to the Director of Administrative and Student Services. The positions of vice chairman and secretary are then determined by an election held during the initial CPC meeting every year. The current members were appointed by the current rector, Father Dante Bendoy, OSA. It would be interesting to note, though, that I have been a member of CPC for 9 years now. And all the other members as well have been in the CPC for more than 5 years. So it's interesting to note that the ones who are appointed are most of the time are reappointed every year. The only way to not be in the CPC is if you are on leave for the whole school year or due to health reasons. So it's basically a very, as far as the institution is concerned, it's a small core group. It's usually just us. And it would be interesting to note why that is so. Di po ba? The first accomplishment of the CSA Child Protection Committee was the formulation of school-based child protection and anti-bullying policies and guidelines. Similarly, pursuant to RA 7610, that is the special protection of children against child abuse, protocols were made to ensure the protection of the rights of child victims of abuse, neglect, violence, exploitation, and bullying. Now, the school's vision, mission, and core values of truth, unity, charity, respect for individual differences and cultural diversity, and the restorative intervention approach to discipline, following our patron saint, St. Augustine's call to love the sinner and hate the sin, are the foundation principles in its formulation.
Yes.
So, as far as the restorative intervention approach, we have to remember po kasi that in this situation or in that environment, it's usually, in a bullying case, it's usually a child versus another child. So these are children who sometimes make the wrong decisions, and that's expected because they are children. So we cannot be harsh in meting out disciplinary measures. So what we usually do is to encourage the children to use the restorative intervention approach. There are 2 steps. The first step being for the 2 children, for the 2 students, to come to a decision on their own, to, for instance, amend or to fix the relationship that was destroyed by a misunderstanding, a disagreement, an argument, or, as they say, the bullying incident. Now, once that's done, they make promises to each other not to hurt each other anymore, or if certain things were destroyed in the matter, in the situation, promises of reimbursements are made. Now, if the children do not agree to that, or one of them will not agree to a restorative approach, then step 2 comes in. The restorative discipline now is more about the disciplinary measures given to the erring student or child. But in both steps, there is always a mediator or a moderator. Of course, there's the head teacher, the subject teacher, the disciplinary group head, and always the counselors. At the end of the investigation and the disciplinary proceedings, there is always monitoring there is always what you call follow-up sessions with our guidance counselors. Because again, we have to remember that these are children that we are dealing with. So we still have to guide them so that in the end, they will not make the same mistakes as before. Now, the primary role of the CPC department representatives is to monitor cases falling under RA 10627 and RA 7610. As a subunit of the Committee for the Special Protection of Children, pursuant to its mandate under Executive Order 53, CSA Makati adheres or follows the protocol for case management by reporting a child abuse incident until its termination, ensuring that the child victims are dealt with in a most child-sensitive and appropriate manner. In this, we are very fortunate that our school physicians, our school pediatricians, are knowledgeable about the child abuse law. We have had cases wherein the teachers have sent the students to the clinic because the teachers themselves noticed something very different with the child. And then as they were sent to the clinic, the doctor in attendance at that moment would immediately do the body mapping. And they would also immediately conduct an investigation or an interview. Now, since we are talking about child-sensitive and appropriate manners, these interviews are never done without the presence of an adult. Usually, we ask the child, the doctor asks the child, who would you like to accompany you during this investigation or interview? So the child is free to choose whether it's the advisor or or a particular counselor or a particular teacher that he or she feels more comfortable with. So we always make sure that the child is protected in every step of a particularly delicate situation. Before accepting the Manual of General Policies and Guidelines as standard operating procedures, approbation from the different heads of the departments are sought. Once approval was given, information dissemination came next. So the CSA CPC Manual of General Policies and Guidelines were presented to the different members of the CSA community, namely administration, faculty, non-teaching staff, maintenance, security, bus operatives, and most especially our stakeholders, the parents. Now, CSA CPC has been part of the landscape of Augustinian education in Makati for almost 9 years, since 2012. The Child Protection Committee is an essential part of the institution as it reviews the discipline decisions in cases of bullying in relation to fairness and due process. For this reason, the CPC has served as a review committee of cases that have not satisfied the parents of or students involved in disciplinary instances. So usually we would receive letters complaining. Well, not usually. Sometimes there will be parents who are not satisfied with what happened with the results of a disciplinary investigation or outcome. So they would elevate this to the CPC. And that's when the CPC would convene meetings to determine if indeed if the allegations of the parents are correct or anything else that may not have been appropriate in how anything was done. Now, as CPC, we work together as a team. And therefore, there are qualities that we believe that is needed by a CPC in order to be effective. First of all, CPC committees should be collaborative. because the CPC works with different departments and its members, not only during cases, in order to provide a safe and secure learning environment. It is best to adopt a proactive stance, and in this is made possible by working closely with the different Augustinian departments. Now, again, another one would be a CPC should be cooperative with each other, not only with each other, but with everyone, since we realize that our task is never easy, but with the strong support and leadership of our rector and the chairman, we are inspired to perform our role to the best of our ability for the welfare of our students and for the common good. Now, the CPC also has to be dedicated, because there will be instances when the committee will have to work before and beyond the usual schedule given. We always go back to the purpose of why we were appointed in the committee, and that is we are there for the students and to ensure the protection of their rights. Now, another thing, a CPC should be dynamic. They should be open to change. There can be changes to guidelines or protocols relating to new laws or even to a new situation like to the pandemic right now. And all of these would benefit the stakeholders and should be addressed expeditiously. So what we do is that we peruse our manual every year. We check it up to amend guidelines accordingly. Now, the CPC members, and as a whole, we have to be objective, which is why during reevaluation of cases, we hold investigations, sometimes from scratch even. And there have been cases also wherein a CPC member excused themselves from the proceedings due to familial affinity to either the victim or the alleged bully. Now, this is always welcome because we have to remain objective, as I said, and this will always give importance to the goal of the proceedings, which is child protection. Now, the CPC has to be resolute. They have to be determined to reach the conclusion of every case. And we try to give ourselves a deadline. As much as possible, the case investigation or reevaluation should only take 7 to 10 days at the most. The CPC should also be reticent. We should always maintain confidentiality of everything and anything pertaining to a case. That's probably also one of the reasons why we have the same appointees to the committee every year. It is basically to keep confidentiality, and we're the only ones who know what the cases have been reported on and what the cases we have evaluated through the years. And the CPC must be trustworthy. So in order to be trustworthy, it has to maintain its integrity, its reliability, and credibility. Because, as the committee, it will face either acceptance or battle from different facets of the school. And the only way for the CPC's decisions or evaluations to be respected would be for it to remain above reproach and circumspect. Now, some of our programs are as follows. We usually have capacity building for the members. In capacity buildings, we always look for seminars and webinars wherein the CPC members can improve themselves, and also at the same time to disseminate the information that they learned to the rest of the community. And we also try to establish linkages. As I mentioned earlier, establishing linkages has probably been our one of the most difficult tasks, because it's so hard for us to find venues of establishing and strengthening connections to other child protection committees and child protection organizations. Another one that we like to do is what we always do is to have the information campaign. We have an information campaign wherein we disseminate everything to our Augustinian community. Every year, we try to have a webinar on child abuse laws and anti-bullying law. But this year, it has been difficult due to our financial constraints or financial difficulties. So we were able to do something by tying up with Ako Para sa Bata conference. Since we are members, they had a virtual conference, and what we did was that we disseminated this to everyone in the Augustinian community, and the response was favorable. And the last that we did this year was we came up with our own online protocol for reporting of child abuse cases. And in this case, we made the CPC the main reporting body to report to the proper authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lisha, for sharing with us, how you created the CPC in your school, the protocols, the programs, and activities. Thank you very much. You mentioned a while ago that you have difficulties establishing linkages outside of your school.
Yes.
I think you have a question for Miss Melba, Dr. Melba.
Yes, Dr. Melba, you said to establish a linkage with DSWD, sorry. How do we go about that po?
The Department of Social Welfare and Development, they have field offices. We have all regions has a unit, field office from the 17 regions we have nationwide, and you can just go there and request, request or to have a talk with the in charge of their merong in charge is CIU, Crisis Intervention Unit, and inquire on how you can coordinate or collaborate in terms of child abuse cases. Pwede rin po sa local government, Sa local government, we have city social welfare and development offices, be it in the municipality or in the city or in the province, So if you go there and or request for some information about how you can partner with them, I think that these offices are willing naman to really coordinate and partner with you. DSWD accredits mga non-government organizations and social welfare agencies. They have a list actually of those child my child caring agencies pa nga So there's an association nationwide called Association of Child Caring Agencies of the Philippines, where we can concerns on child protection can be tied up. And of course, there's UNICEF and other organizations that are really promoting and advocating child protection, be it in school or in the homes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Melba.
Doc Melba, just a follow-up question. What documents should the school prepare when they tie up with these organizations?
I think you just have to write them a letter. Write a letter to the director and state your purpose. Then they will assign you to the appropriate unit of the organization. Pwede naman, they are willing naman to provide and assist you, especially if we are helping actually the department and the other organizations achieve their goal of protecting our children. I think they will be very happy to partner with the schools.
Thank you.
We don't have difficulty because I as chair of the social work department, pwedeng naman anytime. So I think they will, even Bantay Bata 163, all we need to do is just write, sino diba in charge ngayon, she's part of PSCBN. Actually, we have an MOU with them on cases of children while the pandemic is going on last year, and until now we have an memorandum of understanding with them that we assist them in terms of handling cases na pumapasok dun sa hotline, cases of violence against children.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc Melba. From Theresia Bonzel, I think this is for you, Miss Lisha.
Yes, ma'am.
What is actually the role of the school guidance counselor in the school child protection committee?
Okay po. Colegio San Agustin Makati has 3 departments. That would be the early childhood education, the grade school, and the high school. Now, the guidance center, our guidance counselors and coordinators, they give guidance, counseling, and a lot of other programs to all our stakeholders, from the ECE to the senior high school. Their role is quite important because, as I said earlier, every time there is a situation between 2 children, between 2 pupils, between 2 students, the guidance always comes in with services, counseling services, whether it be pre-investigation or post-investigation, and even during the investigation. They are essential to the whole CPC, to the whole child protection, goal in Colegio San Agustin, because they help us address the needs of the child. There are some cases po kasi wherein the child will be more comfortable with a counselor, because teachers like us, sometimes we are very authoritative. Am I correct po? So when we are authoritative, they immediately think that, if I say this to teacher, she will scold me. I don't want to tell her things like this. But whereas with the guidance counselor, there is more of an open communication, wherein the child is able to open up the reasons as to why a situation happened, why he or she did that this way or not. And also, in the post-monitoring of the situation, the child may be more amenable to the suggestions of the guidance counselor. And then in also that situation, the guidance counselor helps the teachers who monitor the situation in the classroom to better address the needs of these children.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lisha. This question is, I think, for Father Ogie. Will it be useful for a student to periodically check their privacy settings on social media on a regular basis?
Thank you, Ms. Solet. Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. As you can see naman, Facebook does offer that option. If you click near the settings, you will look at settings privacy. Tapos there's a section there which says privacy checkup. So that's an easy way to just keep on checking whether these are still the same privacy settings that you would want for your own account.
Thank you, Father Ogie. Father Ogie, with the situation now na lahat ng mga bata nasa bahay, so your talk was more of prevention, di po ba? Oo. Kasi you mentioned about the risks, and you also mentioned parental mediation, no? So I think the school should really create a program for parents na kung saan they can educate parents on how to monitor their children's use of gadgets and yung sa social media nila, no? So dalawa na ngayon ang i-educate din ng school. Even the parents should be educated on this kasi maraming hindi rin tech savvy po no? Ang mga bata ngayon ay nasa mga nasa mga parents nila.
Yeah, if we are to abide by the research, parang I think that's what they're really suggesting, and that is why I think yung UNICEF is really investing in terms of these programs, and there are really a lot of resources online to help schools siguro begin with programs that they could set up for this. In fact, parang one of the things that I encountered was called DigiWorld, no? So it's a web-based parang Java na applet to help young children parang learn about what it means to use the internet responsibly. But I guess parents could also use that because it's really packaged in a way that makes internet use very simple. Pero yun nga, ang mahirap po kasi parang it's like introducing something late in the game wherein we already have ways that we have gotten used to. And for the most part, parang we're not really that conscious about privacy. Nagpa-privacy settings lang tayo kapag may kaaway tayo or kapag binabash. Apart from that, people don't really care about it. And I guess that says much about, parang yung culture natin. Parang, in fact, parang we tend to wash our dirty linen out in the public. And yun, parang, and I think this cultural aspect of it parang has to be taken into account. In fact, parang our use of social media is not a result of the platform itself, but it's really an amplification of what is already there in our culture. Tayo, parang we're always nosy, alamero, parang we want to snoop into people's lives. And that's the kind of thing that social media amplifies for us. Kaya, yun, may mga iba talaga na parang there are noisy Facebook populations. In the Philippines, parang it always figures out dun sa every time there's a research on social media, yung Philippines is really one of the usually mga control groups to. I think because of how we use it and how it seems to really tie in with the culture that we have, where everyone wants to know about what's happening to everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Father Augie. Another one for you from Mark John Naluunan. How can we police or observe the use of social media in our institutions and ensure usage is not damaging? How about in the teachers? Can we protect our privacy?
First po, parang that in itself parang is something that could be debated, no? Parang especially right now, parang we're sort of allergic to policing, no? And in fact, many of the features of network security parang really have to do with surveillance, no? That's one issue in itself that I think administrators have to talk about. But if you're talking of whether that is possible to really do such things, to monitor and filter filter the network within one's university, that is possible. As I've shared earlier, one of the things that we have instituted before here sa Tinadidapa was to block Facebook during office hours. So both students and teachers could not access it. However, people find ways. So there was Twitter, which is as noisy as Facebook. There's Instagram. And right now, parang if you block one thing, there's going to be another platform, no? If you block Messenger, there's Discord, there's WhatsApp, there's Telegram, no? There's so many options, but you can't block everything. So I guess parang my own take, and I think this is, once again, parang my opinion is formed by looking at researches regarding this. I think the tack is not to police, but to educate and foster a more responsible use of the internet. But of course, we can start with something as basic as preventing certain sites, which are really, in a sense, quite from our perspective as Catholic schools, parang it runs contrary to our values talaga. But other sites, they're quite ambivalent. It can work both ways. So, I mean, Facebook could be used for something bad. It could be used for something good, no? But the porn site, parang that's different. Parang you could immediately say, "Oh no, we're going to block access to that, no, within our campuses." But then again, yun po, parang this monitoring or filtering is easy to do if our students were inside our campus. But right now, much of the onus in terms of monitoring our children is beyond this really what a university or what a school can do. Kumbaga, it's fair game outside the walls. So, and yun ka, parang issue din po yun. Parang hanggang saan ba yung pwedeng reach ng school, no? Right now, parang even turning on cameras during classes, medyo hati din yun kasi yung iba parang we need the cameras to stimulate, to foster the social presence, especially when you're lecturing. But there's also the issue of privacy. Parang we're now parang monitoring and surveilling the homes of our students, no? Parang we have access to their bedrooms or to intimate places in their in their houses, no? So that's one issue that we sometimes do not talk about kasi parang pag teacher ka, open yan kasi kung hindi open, bagsak. or please lang, magmakawang teacher, open yun naman kasi ayoko mag-lecture na puro pangalan nakikita. So parang beyond that, I think for us, this is my just my own take on it. Parang for us, I think privacy is not an issue. unless nga may kaaway ka o may tinataguan ka. But apart from that, everyone wants to just flaunt whatever is happening to their life at Facebook. That's who we are. Parang and I guess parang that has to be taken into account. No? So that's why I'm saying parang maybe it's more responsible, fostering a responsible use of the internet rather than just finding ways to keep on blocking and policing. Because tayong mga Pinoy, maybe because of our colonial heritage, we find ways.
Thank you, Father Augie. Doc Melba, na-mention ni Father Augie kanina yung camera na dapat naka-on pag klase, no? May responsibilidad ba ang teacher? Like, for instance, may makita nga siya doon sa likod nung bata na may nangyayari sa bahay? Let's say,
meron.
Meron.
No, kailangan nating i-report yon. Kung tingin natin ay it's posing harm or risk dun sa bata. I think we need to report it. No? We have the responsibility as teachers na i-report ito para ma-prevent or kaya ay ma-address. Gusto ko lang susugan yung sharing ni Father kanina. No? Importante that we work on prevention. So if we have a Child Protection Committee sa mga eskwelahan, probably one of the activities talaga is to also educate the parents. Yung pagbibigay ng kaalaman dun sa mga magulang or sa guardians about all these things that is happening about their children. So it's important that we include that in our activities. And I hope magandang practice yung ginagawa ni na Ma'am Revaldelo, Ma'am Lisha. Sana ay lahat ng mga eskwelahan will also be able to establish their own child protection committee, no? Kasi dito pwede nating i-address nga talaga yung issues of child protection of our children. Mas preventive sana tayo rather than diba, sabi nga nila prevention is better than cure, no? So we can with CPC and guided by the child protection policy and other legislations natin on children or protecting children, we may be able to prevent whatever harm or risks that our children will encounter in the future. So yan lang. So sana we can engage with more proactive activities na mas preventive siya rather than addressing na lang kasi nandyan na siya no? Nangyari na siya. So.
I agree, Dr. Melba, with you, no? Very impressive yung talaga yung pagkaka-create ni na Miss Licia nung kanilang CPC and even the protocols and all. That's why baka pwede namin kayong invite as a consultant para when we create our own CPCs.
Yeah. I would like to credit Father Horacio Rodriguez and Dr. Ami Ronquillo for their immediate response to the call for the child protection policy po. So regarding being a member, it's all up to our rector, Father Dante Bendoy, if he will give us the go signal for that po. Although, may I share something lang po? It's about a case we had earlier this year. Since it's online, kasi during face-to-face, we didn't have any problem since we were in school nga. And if there were cases of either of child abuse or child neglect, immediately we could report to the WCPU of Makati.
Makati, yeah.
Now, in our case earlier this year, we were already in a quarantine situation po, no? And the problem was that the child actually she did not report. She just happened to tell her classmate about it. Mm-hmm. And then her classmate was so bothered because there were also photos that she showed it to her mom. And then the mom was the one who called the attention of the counselor. So the counselor reported to the guidance representative. So we had a meeting and we reported. The problem that we had was that it was in Taguig. And it turns out Taguig City does not have a WCPU. So we had a hard time locating anybody that we could report to. In the end, we ended up, our guidance representative went physically to the Parañaque City Hall and looked for anyone who could help us in the matter. What happened was that we ended up reporting to Bantay Bata, which was good because Bantay Bata, everything. But then so we would always ask for updates kasi nga, syempre, we want to know what's happening. But they were telling us nga na our role ends at reporting because from there on, it would be the social welfare who will take care of everything, who will be the overseer of the case. Tama po ba, Dr. Melba?
Yeah, after they receive the call, they usually refer it to the appropriate local social welfare and development office. So in the case of Taguig, meron talagang local social welfare office na so kung walang Women
CPU.
and Child Protection Unit, lahat ng local social welfare and development office ay may QRT, quick response team that will address sana yung report na yon, yung inyong case. So probably the case from Bantay Bata ay bumalik siya dun sa Taguig. So baka pwedeng doon ninyo siya i-follow up. But you can ask Bantay Bata kung saan nila ni-refer yung case so that you can also do a follow-up. Being a member of the CPC of the school, I think you have the right to know what happened to your case.
Okay. Thank you po, Doc.
Okay, we received so many questions, no? But due to lack of time, we have to end our question and answer segment. And to end it, can we request for a final message from each one of you addressing all our attendees today? May we begin with Miss Licia?
Okay. This is for all those schools who have not yet put up their own CPC or child protection committees. Let this be an encouragement po. You see, coming up with your own CPC is a proactive choice. Mm-hmm. It is also a daunting responsibility. However, fruits of labor like that is the student education and empowerment, their safety and their security will outweigh all the hardship and all the fears that you may have going into it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lisha and Dr. Melba Manapol.
We see the importance of I'd like to support Ma'am Lisha, no, for encouraging all the schools to really establish their own child protection committee, no, to create their child protection committee. But you can start with coming up with your own child protection policy, no. The child protection policy should be customized also dun sa context ng eskwelahan, no. So I'm happy, will be happy if I will see most or almost, if not all, the schools now in the country will have their own child protection policy, and as a result also creating their own child protection committee. No? We in the social work profession is very willing to assist and help. No, kami sa social work education can always support the initiatives of the schools, no, in terms of this, because this is also one of our advocacy, no, always lang, we have to really protect our children, no? Our students and our learners.
Thank you, Dr. Melba. And Father Ogie, Father Ulysses.
Well, I think when we're talking about child online protection, to be able to protect those whom we love, we have to be familiar with that landscape. No? And that might mean quite of a stretch for us, no? Especially as we're also going into a seemingly unfamiliar terrain, no? Of all these gadgets, applications, mga ganyan, no? Things that we'd rather leave to our children. But then again, if it's really something that is of if it is a serious matter for us, then I think we might have to really learn not only the ways in which they communicate right now, but also the spaces that they're now occupying. So, and by that, it's really getting into the technology and getting into the platforms so that we would know for ourselves how it could be potentially beneficial, and at the same time, how it could be potentially dangerous as well.
Wow, we are really so blessed today for having the three of you here sa aming session, sa third day session, no? So to end this, allow me to say the change from the face-to-face to online in the teaching learning scenario necessitated a change in our policies, including those dealing with child protection. Perhaps the lesson to be learned here is for us to always be ready to meet these new challenges, bearing in mind always the safety of our students in whatever setup they may be in. So again, we thank you, Ms. Lisha, Dr. Melba, and Father Ogie for being our resource persons today. Thank you very much. I'll give you a virtual applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me now call on the Deputy Executive Director of CEAP, Ms. Mary Ann Cruz, to give us the synthesis and the next steps of this summit.
Thank you very much, Olette, and thank you, Father Ogie, Doc Melba, and Miss Lisha for your wonderful sharing. Allow me to give you the synthesis of the entire 3-day summit. When we began the 2021 CEAP Child Protection Summit on the Feast of the Annunciation, Father Fidel, our Mass presider, reminded us that from the beginning of Mary's story in the Annunciation to the coming of the Holy Spirit in Pentecost, she showed the importance of having the right relationship with God and the right relationship with God's people, even in moments when she did not quite understand or might have been confused herself. She relied on and built strong relationships. This motif of having the right relationship with God and God's people was a recurring one during this entire summit. Sister Marisa, in her opening remarks, underscored this when she emphasized Benchmark 2.2 of the Philippine Catholic School Standards and reminded us that our schools must always be places of real encounter with God, especially for our students, and that we have to constantly be images of God to them and they to us. Dr. Gina Lamzon, who outlined to us the state of mental health in the Philippines, also emphasized the need to have a significant relationship, for it is a basic human need to be attached to a person. But more importantly and holistically, it is very important to point to the children to have a proper relationship with God. Mrs. Ragunton, our parent speaker, gave us some tips on effectively supporting our children in achieving their goals and making them feel loved by showing respect to their feelings and ideas, mirroring the face of Christ. Dr. Nelly Limbadan shared with us how healthy relationships, how healthy friendships are very important to the child's development. But she also emphasized the importance of establishing meaningful partnerships between the home and the school. For as Doc Nelly said, family and school partnerships ought to be collaborative relationships that are based on trust. The school, the staff, the parents, and other family members must work as a whole village and must work for the good of the children. For as Pope Francis reminded us in the Global Compact in Education, the children ought to be the center of all our educational endeavors. With the COVID-19 pandemic, however, the said village and the children's relationships have expanded into a global village, one that extends to the cloud, the online world. Hence, Father Ogie presented to us how the change in the setup to online learning carried with it its share of online risks, prescribing possible interventions to ensure our children's safety as they do their online learning. Doc Melba reminded us of the proper procedure and approaches in handling and reporting cases, bearing in mind the importance of ensuring that the rights of the child are upheld throughout the entire process, making the child feel protected at all times. Moving forward, collaboration and networking seem to be the key in this very challenging task of child protection. We were invited to be proactive, to initiate community activities to help protect our children. We were encouraged as schools to integrate psychosocial preparedness to be integrated into school and community activities to prepare them to navigate the new territories so as not to be overwhelmed when situations like COVID-19 happen unexpectedly. Hence, as an association of more than 1,500 member schools, we will look into stronger partnerships and linkages with the CBCP, the NGOs, and government agencies to protect our students. We are looking also into crafting a CEAP Child Protection Manual with appendices that deal with enhancing partnerships between the home and the school for child protection, maximizing technology for greater participation, and capacitating the youth for mental health work, among others. To end, I echo Father Fidel's messages to the administrators, faculty, personnel, and parents in his homily when he said, "Not all of us are called to cure mental illness. That is the task of medical science. But we are all called to be a guiding, healing presence to help people, especially young people, avoid brokenness. Just like how Angel Gabriel assisted Mary, we are here to help young people in their time of confusion. Let us be like angels, announcing good tidings to the children, listening to their doubts, assuaging their heartaches, helping them to heal and move out of the darkness they occasionally find themselves in. May we all be angels, and may we all radiate with the love of God to our students. Thank you and have a blessed afternoon ahead.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cruz. As we end this Child Protection Summit, we would like to thank our partners, the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PEAC, and our web host, Tech Factors, for being our wonderful partners for this 3-day summit. On behalf of our President, Sister Maria Marisa Viri, RVM, and the CEAP Board of Trustees, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, the Executive Director and the National Secretariat, this is Ms. Olet Ochave, your moderator for today, saying thank you and have a blessed weekend.
Sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong punyo at serbisyong totoo. Kahalintulad ni Kristo, isang puwarang Katoliko. Pagkakaisa sa tulong at gawa, masasalamat sa mundo, magagawa sa biyaya ni Kristo.
Ang kabataan,
may hamon at alam
sa ating bayan,
maging lingkod at tulad
ng pagbabago,
sa misyon sa mundo. Birhen Maria ang gabay at ang modelo. May bagong anyo, isang bansang may bagong sigla. Dahil sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong mundo at servisyo.